Welcome to Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Being a fireman, father, veteran, husband, world record holder, and Ironman, he brings stories of experience to impact your life while challenging you to live it. What do you want from your life? Why do you want it? Are you willing to go through the challenges to get there? If you have the courage to take that first step, let this podcast be the catalyst to start your fire while you bring the resilience to make it continue to burn. Our lives are made up of moments called right nows. So let's get started. Forged in the Fires podcast with your host, Fireman Rob, begins now.
Welcome back to Forged in the Fires podcast. I'm your host, Fireman Rob. You know, I always want to have back those guests that are really impactful and those individuals that are going to provide those nuggets of wisdom when we need them the most. And one of those individuals that I wanted to have back was Rocky. I mean, you are one of those people that have been through a lot of different things, and you have that book, Tighten the Lug Nuts. And you and I were talking, and we wanted to have you back on just for the fact of helping us to get through this time, because you transitioned perfectly from that in-person speaking to virtual speaking. How'd you do that in this kind of time?
Well, first of all, it's always great to be on your show, and it's a pleasure to talk to you always. And I think these are interesting, difficult times, but it really becomes a measure of your character. It becomes a measure of your ability to adapt and adjust. And so for me, I still want to get my message out there. As you and I talked previously, for me, this concept of legacy is so important. Do you leave things a little better than you found them? So for me, at this point in my life, in my career, the way I can leave things maybe a little bit better is, through some of the stories, some of the lessons that I learned, some of the experiences, and more important, some of the mistakes that I made along the way that maybe you can share with other people, especially as they go through some difficult times. And so for me, the transition was that concept of, all right, if I want to leave things a little better than I found them and try to improve some things as best I can as an individual, maybe I can do that through this whole kind of virtual where you jump on a conference call and you talk about a specific topic, or maybe I've done some of these virtual keynotes, and you see the Zoom boxes moving around all over the place, and you're trying to stay focused because the heads are popping in and popping out, but the goal is stay focused on your topic and try to kind of imagine that group sitting in front of you. But for me, that was my way of the transition is, what is it that I want to accomplish? And that's to leave things a little better than I found them. Can I make a difference, and can I use some of that experience? And so the transition to the virtual was, okay, I can still do those things. Different if I was a mechanic and I can't work on a virtual car, right? But I can work on, I can do these keynotes, and I can do the training, and I can do conversations like I am with you.
And being like when you were a high level at UPS and kind of understanding what a lot of these individuals are going throughout the world, really, it's not even just our country, it's throughout the world, with having to deal with not having employees on site and trying to motivate people, because there's a lot of depression. There's a lot of just unknown, like we were talking about earlier, in this world. How do you deal with that as a manager? Because that is such a huge thing, because you have to balance the personal life of the individual as well as the professional life. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think the first and most important skill that you really have no choice but to hone, and as you say, forged in fire, but now forged in this situation, is the ability to be a good communicator. Because you really almost have to over communicate now, because you can't, it's not like you can walk down the hall or down, to a different room in the firehouse and talk to one of your peers and have a conversation. You really have to work at it now. And it's not acceptable to text somebody constantly, their new assignments or what they're working on, or talk to them about, how they're doing in their roles and responsibility. I think it's going to be really important for you to be able to pick up the phone and have that conversation or have that Zoom call. So I think communication is always an important trait and an important, skill of a leader. But now I think it becomes more important, and you really have to work at it, because when there's no communication and there's a void in communication, people make up their own, fill in the gaps themselves with their own information. And unfortunately, sometimes, Rob, as you know, sometimes that information sometimes they guess right, but a lot of times they're filling in the blanks with the way they feel or the way they perceive things are or what they would like to see happen. So I think that that's probably the most important skill to hone and work out is that skill of communication and ability to communicate. And then one other quick point. So on the people working at home, people working, virtually now,
right.
I think unfortunately the problem with that is that you lose that connectivity. You lose the ability to feel like you're part of a team.
Right.
You feel, like that, like your house is a team. Your house is a family. It's, when you go into a fire, it's a synchronized chaos, I guess, right? It's like everybody knows their role, right? Everybody knows their role and responsibility. Everybody understands. They always talk about how on an aircraft carrier, no one can really talk to each other because it's so loud, but everybody knows their roles and responsibilities. They watch each other and they clearly understand what they're supposed to do. Well, in this new virtual world, I think it's going to be important for us to be able to understand what our people are doing, being able to communicate with them, and also understanding that if you're one of those employees who's a hardworking individual you're getting your job done every day, you're probably working more hours and working harder at home than you ever did in the office, right? Because at least at the office,
so true,
right? Right. At least at the office, if the time for everyone to leave was 6 o'clock and you had a half-hour commute, at least you were in the car for a half hour, with some downtime. But if you're home and you're that high, really high energy, really committed employee, you're really walking by your computer every time you walk by. It's like, oh, it's just got another email. Oh, I got to take care of this. So it feels like that employee who's really doing a great job, it's very committed, it's really part of that process for you, one that you really count on. You have to be careful that they're not really working 24/7. Then, of course, the employee that was a little bit of a problem to begin with is really a problem now, right? Because now, right? Think about that. Before, when they were down the hall, at least you could walk down. Where you been? What's going on here? We got to get some stuff happening here, right? Where now, who knows what they're working on? It's like it's not only the kid in the background; it's everything else going on. Hold on, exactly. I got FanDuel on the line. I'll be right back.
I have to change my fantasy football team before.
Yeah, right.
Late. Right.
So I think it's the same individuals, who had maybe some issues, and there were a small percent, obviously. Most of your people really do a good job and work hard. But that small group that can sometimes get, a little bit sidetracked and, get themselves in a little bit of trouble, you really got to pay attention to them and make sure that you help them not get themselves in trouble. And of course, the high energy, the committed people, the people who are really doing a good job for you, you want to make sure that you recognize them, that they are, and realize that they may be working more hours than they ever have before.
That is probably one of the most interesting statements, because realistically, it went from like a controlled environment where you have control of the high end and the low end to an environment where you truly see which employees are benefiting and which employees are not. And then at the same time, you don't want to burn out your top end employees because they're committed to the purpose of the business. It's interesting. That's a great way of putting it.
Oh, it's like I always tell people, if you're that manager that comes up with a lot of great ideas, you're excited about your newest idea. But those early adopters are like pinballs, right? Every time you come up with a new idea, they're the early adopter. Like, we're going to try this. Oh, okay, I'm all in. And then they start going. The next day, it's, we got a new idea. Oh, I'm all in. I'm going to go over there. Meanwhile, the people in the middle are like, take a deep breath. He's going to change his mind anyway. And of course, the people way at the other end, it doesn't matter what to tell them. They're not, they're not doing anything anyway. They're on their own they're on their own agenda maybe. But I think that you always want to pay attention to that 80% of your good people who are really trying to do the best job they can. Because think about it, Rob, most people, the vast, vast majority of people don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I think today I'm going to do a bad job. Yeah, I think today's the day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Most people want to do the best job they can. Some are, a little better than others in terms of their degree of commitment maybe, or how intensely they do it. But the vast majority of people want to do their job, do the best they can, and get home and see their families. And so I think you got to just pay attention to that group and make sure that you're not so focused on your least best or most help needed group of people, that you make sure that you recognize the good people, make sure they know that you know they're working hard. Occasionally ask them how things are going at home, making sure that, hey, on the weekends, make sure you're spending the quality time with your family. And don't be that boss that says, hey, I don't want you to check every email, but then you're sending them emails 24/7, right?
It's the opposite of what you're actually, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, going back to like when you started your career with UPS and thinking about those individuals, like, because you started as a package handler, right? Loader
Yes.
and unloader.
Yes, sir.
Now, thinking back to that, and that was a long time ago. I'm not putting you on the spot that you're old, but your experience there, Rocky.
Yes, there you go. There you go.
But think back to those people, because we can always talk about the leaders. But there's also the self leaders who come to work, who do those little things to make the end product come to fruition. What would you say to those individuals that are going into these situations, that are struggling through these times too, that are those part-time package handlers or those unloaders and loaders? How would you get them through these situations?
Well, the first thing is I think it's important to recognize as the leader that there are no easy jobs in any company, and that every job is there because it serves a purpose. And you think about your house and the individuals in your fire team. Every one of those are an important job. They're it's like a quarterback on a football team. Yeah, they get a lot of the glory and they get the praise when things are going well, and kind of all of the talk in the newspaper when they keep throwing interceptions. But at the end of the day, if the other 10 players don't play well, they don't. So it's the same concept. So one is you understand that there are no easy jobs, and why that's so important is because then you start to recognize and understand what everyone's roles and responsibilities are. And then you make sure you understand them. You make sure that, that part-time package handler, for example, while the driver is what everyone saw, as it pertains to UPS, the brand, at the end of the day, though, without that package handler, the package doesn't get from point A to point B. And more importantly, it doesn't get to the right point A to the right point B, right? Because the packages have to be, in those days, you were reading every label and sorting every package. Today, technology helps you out a little bit more, but at the end of the day, those packages don't move. So I think number one is understanding that there are no easy jobs. Every job's important. Number two, recognizing what role and responsibility they have in the process, in the grand scheme of things. And I think that, and then you let them know that. And I think the other thing you always should do, especially in these times, is recognize the behaviors that you want emulated. So those individuals, we tend to spend a lot of time on, the most help needed, or the people who are in trouble, or the people who are a problem. The problem with that is they may be only 10 or 20% of your organization. And so now what happens is you're spending all your time with them, but 80% of the people doing a great job you never recognize. I say flip that. Recognize the good people, recognize the behaviors that you want, and then let those other folks want to be part of the good, right? If there's no advantage of being good, then there are those groups of people that look at you and say, well, what's the point of doing more? What's the point of taking on additional responsibility? No one recognizes it, and all it does is get me more work. You want to change that, kind of narrative, and you want that narrative to be, no, I want to recognize good behaviors. I want to recognize the people who are doing a good job, and I want to applaud them. And I think that's what's so important.
I love it. And you can go to tightentheLugnuts.com and find the book, where you talk about the principles of balanced leadership. And that's really what we're talking about today, because it's a different world. It's a different world that who knows when it's going to change. And I think that's a lot of people are struggling with that unknown. When you were going through, UPS, when you were working your way through, and that's an amazing story that you have, I have to say, that you started as an unloader loader, and then you ended up, in a position that, like, tell me what was that transition? How did you really get that belief that, hey, at one day I can be at this level, at that top level, at that global level that you were at?
Well, I got to tell you, even today, I'm still not quite sure that I was the right guy for every one of those jobs, because I think I remember when I got called into Atlanta. It was our corporate office. I was running the South Cal district, South California at the time. And it was our largest district, and I got called into Atlanta, and our CEO at the time, Jim Kelly, said, "Hey, we got a new responsibility for you. We want you to run. We just purchased mailbox, et cetera, and we want you to run that. Try to get understand, and start building a strategy around it." And I looked at him, I go, and I knew Jim. We all in those days at UPS, kind of grew up with each other. I'm like, Jim, you got to have somebody smarter than me to do this. Come on. And he's like, "No, Rock, I think you're it. You got to, So I think what ends up happening is, number one is, I think the best way to learn in life is to understand that you don't know everything, and be vulnerable. Understand that asking for help or asking questions. And I tell people all the time, the biggest thing I know is what I don't know. And so in those days, I didn't, I didn't understand franchising. So the first thing I did, and I guess I learned this from my early days of being an unloader and a loader and being a driver, that you worked your way up from the bottom up. And so the first thing I did was put an apron on and go work a day in the store and understand what is it like to be a store franchisee. Now, I clearly didn't have their skill, and I would never, ever, presume that I have their skill and knowledge. But for me, I wanted to take the time to understand what it is that we do here and get them to understand that I had so much respect for what they did as entrepreneurs that I wanted to come out and spend some time with them. And in every job I got at UPS, and when I retired from UPS, I was a CEO of a telecom company. We built cell towers, upgraded cell towers. And one of the first things I did there was, okay, let me go and do an installation job. Let me go work a day on a cell tower. Now, I wasn't qualified to climb a tower, but I was there. I think that's so important that.
Come on, you could have climbed it. Rocky.
Yeah. No, I'm a little short Italian guy. My feet weren't, I think my legs were long enough. I'm not sure they got the rungs for this little guy here, but I think that's so important that you never lose sight of who really represents your brand. And that's that person at the front line closest to the customer. So, and I think the biggest lesson I learned there is, on a serious note, UPS believed in Rocky Romanella well in advance of me believing in myself. And so I think what I learned, the valuable lesson for me is that leaders believe in their people until they're ready to believe in themselves. They bridge the gap. I mean, think about when you get a new person in the firehouse, right? And they haven't gone on their first run yet. And so you're believing in them, and you're bridging that gap of knowledge and experience. And then there's a point where they get to that kind of break even point, right? It's the same with people inside an organization and leadership and a teacher. You got your first classroom, and you've got your first days, and it's time. And then, but maybe that principal or that mentor is believing in you, and they bridge that gap of knowledge and experience. And then you get to that break even point, right? And then that's when you step back, right? And that's when you let them fly. That's when you don't overmanage them. That's when their authority equals their responsibility. And then they start to really flourish because they see that you have that confidence in them, and you're willing to give them more authority and more responsibility. And I think that's what I learned through my experience, is that, hey, you know what? They believed in me until I was ready to believe in myself, and they bridged that gap. I have to do that for all the people who I come in contact with. And I think as your audience is sort of thinking about those things, there's many people in their organizations, whether it's, in a family organization or whether it's in a soccer team, a PTA, pick something, some organization that you're with. You can see those people as they start to take on different roles and responsibilities, especially the newer ones. You can start to see them start to grow and develop. And it's because people are believing in them until they're ready to believe in themselves.
Oh, man. I was going to have you actually do what is your parting thought for the folks, but I think you just did it. Because that was awesome. I love the perspective that you give, and definitely people, you should go to tightenthelugnuts.com, because all the perspectives that you're getting today are even more enhanced in that book. Rocky, it is always a pleasure to have you on. I think this may be like one of those standard guest that comes on the show every once in a while and tells people what they need to start doing.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm honored to be on the show. And it's always great to talk to you. And listen, you be safe out there. And if, the book is Tighten the Lug Nuts. It's on Amazon. We're doing really well on Amazon, and it's very humbling to see the sales. Really, it far exceeds expectations. So I really appreciate that. But more importantly, you and all your audience, be safe, and hopefully we can talk soon again.
I love it. Rocky, it's been a pleasure having you on again, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast, and please share this episode with a friend or family. To find out more about Fireman Rob or reach out about a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, live your life forged in the fires.